I want to show that you can build purpose and mission into every kind of business. And I'm a big believer that that's how we're going to change the world, is by changing capitalism, by changing the way that we think about operating and leading businesses.
This is The Safari. The Safari is a tour around the consumer, brand, and retailing industry. And we have the great privilege here at my company, Traub, to really be exposed to many of the great minds of the industry who are forming and shaping the future of many different parts of the consumer, brand, and retail world. And I felt it was quite interesting for us to be able to not only learn from all of those people as we do every day, but memorialize it into a podcast, which could then be shared with many of our friends and clients and you, obviously, the listener. Welcome back, everybody. It is September 2021, and we are back from a long summer break, and we haven't done one of these in a while. And I really wanted to explore the social entrepreneur some more. There's a lot of mindfulness in consumerism that we've talked about here and in prior white papers at Traub. And I think it's really cool to kick off the season with one of the great minds in that space. And so Davis Smith grew up throughout Latin America and has since dedicated his life to helping those in need there and around the world. And he's a passionate social entrepreneur and adventurer. Davis is currently the founder and CEO of Cotopaxi, which is a brand that many of you may know. It's an outdoor gear and active lifestyle brand with a social mission at its core. And the brand creates, innovative products and experiences that fund sustainable poverty alleviation around the world. And it's the first company to incorporate from inception as a benefit corporation and raise venture capital thereafter. So it's kind of interesting that someone who has this social mission at its core from inception was able to raise capital, and not only that, most recently bring in a world famous firm to come in to its capital. So without further ado, stick around. Davis Smith is fantastic. Davis, thank you so much for joining me on the Safari today.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I am really excited that after 55, this will be probably in the mid-50s episode, we have not done one on active outdoor lifestyle, if you can believe it. And my partner was the former CEO of the North Face, and he was so excited that we are talking to you, and I'm absolutely delighted that we can be here with you today. And where are you right now?
I'm in Salt Lake City, up in the mountains of Salt Lake City, and actually doing this from my home office, which is kind of a new thing for me over the last 18 months, like it probably is for a lot of people.
Well, look, I'm so delighted. Your brand is one that we have followed and known of for quite some time, and we were introduced by a mutual friend. And what I think is so spectacular about what you've been able to do is take a category that some might say is relatively overdone. There's many brands that do what you do, but you managed to imbue it with not only a very distinctive look and feel. It's not about just the wonderful logo, but literally the product and the colors and the color schemes and the way they hang together, but also the fact that right underneath it, the company has a soul, and you're really giving back in a huge way to the wonderful people that you probably grew up with in your travels as a young guy around South America, when you even growing up, I think, and this notion of content, community, and consumer products, and that sort of mashing of the two together with a great story and a great product. As you can hear, it gets me kind of jazzed. And so I'd love to hear how you got into this business, how you kind of managed to, I'm sure, like everyone says, you're an overnight sensation in years, 10 years. But anyway, give us the story. How did you start, and how are we getting here?
Yeah, no, this is fun. And I'm so glad that we'll have a chance to talk about some of these things that I'm really passionate about: the outdoors, social impact. And it really kind of starts with my childhood. As you pointed out, I actually left the United States with my family when I was 4 years old, and we moved to Latin America. My childhood and teen years were really an adventure. My dad was an adventurer. We'd hang out in the jungle every day near my house. My brother and I would. My dad would take us climbing into active volcanoes in the Andes. We made our own raft and floated the Amazon River, fishing for piranha. We'd go survive on uninhabited islands and spear fish and eat coconuts to survive. I thought this was normal behavior. But when we weren't adventuring, we were serving, and it was something my parents were very passionate about. And I didn't come from money. My parents, we didn't have a lot of money in our home, but we spent time visiting orphanages and shelters and in slums. And this was a really impactful thing as a young child. As a 4-year-old, I was seeing children completely naked on the sides of the street or in slums. And it was, at that young age, trying to understand why your life is so different, and was hard trying to reconcile that. So it certainly had a huge impact on the way that I saw the world and frankly, what I wanted to do with my life.
And for those who have not been following Cotopaxi, and those people are living under a rock, I think, but nonetheless, if for those who don't know of Cotopaxi, describe a little bit the products, the focus of the brand, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So the brand is an outdoor brand. We're a brand that manufactures backpacks, jackets, outerwear, activewear, tents and sleeping bags. We're kind of in this category with, the North Face and Patagonia and Columbia, and all these other, iconic outdoor brands that have been around for really decades, 50 plus years. And so we're kind of an emerging brand in that space, a brand that really kind of targets this really a younger consumer, a millennial and a Gen Z consumer. The product, like as you pointed out, is very recognizable, very colorful, which kind of ties back to these roots that I have in Latin America, where there's just so much color and just everything is alive and there's music. And, I wanted to bring some of that spirit into the brand.
And so interestingly, we have this love affair here with both obviously brands at Traub, but also with the enthusiast category. Many of my colleagues here have been involved with businesses, marathon businesses and, car enthusiast businesses. And obviously, as I just mentioned, outdoor enthusiasts as well. And we often say that if you have an incredible brand, as well as a very enthusiastic consumer about that activity who happens to also love your brand, then the famous sort of financial statistics that everyone loves to throw around today in the investment world of LTV to CAC actually become a reality, because your LTV is made longer by the enthusiast consumer, and your CAC is reduced because everyone's doing word of mouth. Everyone's talking about you to their friends and their peers who are also enthusiasts. So it's sort of this wonderful nirvana type place to be. Am I exaggerating, or do you feel some of that?
No, this is 100% true. And actually, I think the learning that I had on this was actually when I was in business school. My first week or maybe second week of business school, I met up with some classmates that were wanting to start an e-commerce business selling eyewear, glasses. And they were, this is in 2009. And I had built going into business school, I had built a successful e-commerce business called pooltables.com. Very random business, small business, never raised venture capital, but, we were profitable. We became the largest retailer of pool tables in the country, very small industry. So not that impressive, but I had some experience behind me. These classmates of mine were telling me about this vision they had for building this brand, and they called it Warby Parker. And
I think we're both wearing a pair maybe right now, but
I think we both are. So, but they kind of explained to me this vision they had for building this business. And I was really excited about it. But then I went and Googled, I brought up my computer right then and I Googled, glasses or eyewear on Google. And there were like dozens of other websites already selling glasses, and for like $50. And they were saying, we're going to price it just under 100. And I was like, guys, I'm so excited for you. But at the same time, like, I hate to break it to you, but people are already doing this in a big way. Like, I don't understand how you're going to compete. You don't, even the name, I don't remember it. Like, it's kind of a unique, different name. And you don't have like glasses.com or some great domain. And they're like, no, Davis, you don't understand. We're going to go build a brand. And I was like, well, if it's not easy, like if it would, everyone would just go do that if you could charge a little bit more and have more customer loyalty and all these things. But I watched them do it. And, I was lucky enough that I actually put a small check in their seed round. I loved watching them grow that business. And I learned so much watching how they built a brand, and they actually had some mission and purpose built into the business as well. It's a little more on the periphery, but I learned a lot from watching that. And that's where I really started recognizing the value in brand and the way that they connected with and created this tribe of like really fiercely loyal customers.
Absolutely. I mean, we wrote in 2017 a white paper, I guess that's what it was, a white paper about what we call the pagan consumer, about the importance of mindfulness and maybe spirituality even in consumerism today. And in fact, it was interesting. We had another brand that is very different to yours, but also had Central American, well, yours was South American, but this was Central American roots, which was Pura Vida, the bracelets. And they sold their business recently, but they were basically imbuing each of those products not only with obviously beautiful product, the power of great product, even though it's a bracelet, but it was manufactured by these local native tribes from the various parts of Central America. And it imbued those products with a sort of a spiritual aura because they came from these really authentic, beautiful places. And those entrepreneurs were bringing them effectively into the consumers' lives. And I think this idea of having spirituality in the products that are created, this notion of you can do good through consumerism, this idea that consumerism is this plague. Actually, no, you can actually vote with your wallet and follow the companies that do well. And I think, case in point, your foundation, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Your foundation, which I'll let you sort of give the headlines on it, but what a moving thing for you to have created and be able to continue. And I'm assuming now it's going to just go from sort of step to step now. Leapfrogging all your expectations in your early on years. But your foundation is, I think, a pillar to what you do. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started the business, the first thing I did when I had the idea was I called an attorney of mine that had helped me establish and help do the rounds for a previous business. And I told him, hey, I'm really interested in building a new business, but that's focused on doing good. And I'd like to incorporate as a benefit corporation. How experienced are you with this? He's like, yeah, I've actually helped a number of businesses that he'd been involved with convert to benefit corporations. And he's like, yeah, you can do that. He's like, but I wouldn't do it from inception. He's like, why don't you convert to a benefit corporation after a few years when you've proven that you can build a business that's successful? And he's like, no one's going to want to invest. VCs are not going to want to invest in a business that's committed to giving away money before you've ever made money. So don't get that backwards. And, I think that's really good advice, but I didn't take it.
I had a feeling.
Yeah. I just felt, so strongly about why this business and brand needed to exist. And we didn't exist. We weren't going to exist to sell backpacks. The world didn't need another backpack company or another jacket company. What it needed was businesses with souls and that care deeply about people and missions and purpose. And so we incorporated as a benefit corporation, and we did raise, we found investors that believed in us, and it wasn't easy. I think we probably got rejected more than we maybe would have otherwise. But that purpose and mission was built into the business, and the foundation was something we established a few years later when we recognized that we had so many customers and even other businesses that would come and say, hey, we want to buy a bunch of your jackets or your bags for our company because we really align with the mission. And by the way, could we make a small donation to you guys to help with your work in fighting poverty? There was no way that we could take those donations. We weren't a nonprofit. We couldn't take customers' donations and said, hey, can I donate an extra $5 in my purchase? We really didn't have a mechanism for that. the foundation allowed us to do that. It was like, hey, we now have this nonprofit under the umbrella of our benefit corporation that allows us to take donations from others, and we cover all the overhead of the team that does that. And 100% of those donations from the foundation go towards fighting poverty. And last year, we directly assisted 822,000 people living in poverty through this foundation. This year, we're going to surpass the 1 million number. So it's the thing I'm most proud of. It's what I wake up in the morning thinking about, is this mission and this purpose of fighting poverty.
Yeah, and so, speaking of mission and purpose, from a consumer perspective is one thing, but maybe talk about how that helps all of your colleagues wake up every morning and charge into work every day. Because I'm sure from an HR perspective, it enlivens their spirits too.
Absolutely. This is an interesting thing. Neil Blumenthal from Warby Parker mentioned this to me. He said, one of the greatest outcomes from their having purpose built into their business was the ability to attract and retain talent. And I've certainly seen that to be true with us. I've built 2 different businesses before this. I've done a lot of hiring over the years and worked really hard to retain great teams. It has been very different with Cotopaxi. We have as many as 1,000 applicants per job opening. I've never experienced that before. And it's not because we pay better than market. We pay at market rates. Like everyone on our team could probably go make more money if they went and hunted for a job somewhere else. We try to pay fairly, but people are working with us because they believe in our purpose. It's not a job. It's not a career move. It's a calling for us. And you see that in the way that the team interacts, and our ability to retain talent has been something that's been really unique.
We'll be right back. I want to take a second to explain to you why Traub is able to bring you the safari. We pride ourselves in being at the very center of a very global, very complicated consumer and retail landscape. And in our travels, as we help think, manage, and expand businesses in many different channels and geographies, we're able to meet and learn from some of the great minds in this industry, and it's really wonderful to be able to bring them to you. And in doing so, I hope that you, the listener, will be able to learn a little bit more about what we do at Traub as well. Back to the safari. And this might be slightly off reservation for what we're supposed to be talking about, but I was just with one of my colleagues. We were talking about, this, it's not called the Great Retirement, the Great
Recession, or the Great Resignation.
The Great Resignation. Thank you. Yeah. And the Great Resignation of many young people, and it's a serious thing, saying to themselves, look, I would rather choose living in, not a 10 million person city and moving to a smaller city closer to mountains with hiking trails and biking trails and rapids and it could be that thing they want to do. Maybe they want to go and hit 2 buckets of balls every morning and every night, right? And so this idea that people are prioritizing their well-being, their spirituality, over, frankly, and it's hard for many people to believe this, a paycheck, right? It may not be the highest paycheck, but it'll be the highest fulfillment. It's kind of crazy, and so really, actually, when you think about it, it's really not crazy. It's actually kind of makes you feel good for the future of our country, hopefully. But do you think that will port to businesses across all parts of our industry? Is it possible to imbue your kind of a mission into pick any widget business? I mean, how do you think that can port into other businesses?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, we've actually probably been a beneficiary from this shift that people are making. As we have a business that's very purpose driven, we're in a place that's surrounded by the outdoors, and 5 or 10 minutes, I can be on up in the mountains. A minute from my house, 30 seconds, I can be on a trail. It's been a nice change. And during the pandemic, it's been really interesting to see, Utah has the lowest unemployment rate in the country, around 2.5%. So I think we've seen a lot of people looking to make the shift, to your point. And your question around, can every business figure out a way to do this? I believe the answer is yes. And Interestingly, I talked about that first business that I built right out of undergrad, the pooltables.com business. Very random, kind of weird business.
Mm-hmm.
I sold it over a decade ago. The person I sold it to reached out to me early this year. I still had a small amount of equity in the business. He reached out and said, "Hey, I've got a buyer for the business. I'm looking to retire, and I'm going to be selling the business. I just wanted to give you a heads up." At first, I was excited. The more I thought about it over that day, I thought, you know what? I want to buy this business back. And I did. I ended up buying the business back a few weeks ago. I bought it back and I've converted it to a benefit corporation. And we are going to go build mission and purpose in fighting poverty and sustainability into this brand in an industry that is not thinking about this. This is not on anyone in that industry's radar. And what I want to do is I want to prove that no matter what industry you're in, no matter how big or small your business is, you can find, or how old it is. That business is now almost 20 years old. I want to show that you can build purpose and mission into every kind of business. And I'm a big believer that that's how we're going to change the world, is by changing capitalism, by changing the way that we think about operating and leading businesses.
I agree with you. And that's a pull quote right there. I love what you just said. And I think it's incredibly inspirational. How old is your business, the current one, Cotopaxi?
Yeah, Cotopaxi is 7 years old. We started in 2014.
2014. And so how did you wake up one morning and say, I'm obviously, I know that, adventure was in your soul, and in your blood. That's probably 80% of it. But how did you go about, what were the first products? I mean, a lot of people who listen to this love the founder story, but how did you just jump into this category?
Yeah, so it was a category that I kind of had my eye on for a while. Just being someone that loves the outdoors, I also recognized it was very saturated. But it's an interesting experience that I had and how I kind of came here, which was I was laying in bed one night in Brazil, and I set a New Year's resolution earlier that year that I was going to change somebody's life. That's what I wanted to do that year. And my wife always makes fun of my goals because they're not smart. I don't even remember what the acronym stands for, like specific, measurable, attainable. I don't remember exactly, but like my goals sometimes could be a little better. But this is what I had in my mind, and I had a little Post-it note on my mirror. And, I was brushing my teeth at night, and I was thinking about this and thinking, you know what, I was feeling discouraged. My whole life I'd known I wanted to have purpose in giving back. And that's why I chose to be an entrepreneur in the first place. I'd been a philanthropist mentor of mine who had been a successful entrepreneur told me if I wanted to make a difference, I should be an entrepreneur. I'd be able to figure out a way to do that. And I was feeling discouraged. And I went to bed that night and my mind was racing around this idea of giving back. And I ended up getting out of my bed, going on the couch, and just started writing down this flow of ideas that was coming to me. And I ended up staying on the couch that night, all night, the entire next day, and the entire following night. And over that 36 or 40-hour period, I had the concept for building this business, this brand in the outdoor space that would make a difference. And so that's really how I kind of landed on the space. And a few things that mattered was it was a big market.
Yep.
I felt that was important to go to sustainably and scalably fight poverty. I needed to choose a category that could scale, that I could build $1 billion business in. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to have the scalable impact that I wanted to have. And then it was a space that I was really passionate about. And while I didn't, the pool table business, I wasn't really into pool or billiards. I don't think you need to have that passion necessarily to build a good business, but I think it helps. And that was something that mattered to me.
Tell me a little bit about how you decided to, where we are today. I mean, today you built a brand, and to build a brand in 7 years from a running start, I think is a remarkable feat. But you have presumably a pretty heavy direct consumer bent. But also presumably, like Neil Blumenthal and all the crew, even Everlane and others, they've realized that maybe the other customer acquisition cost is rent. We don't have to just send dollars to Sergey Brin and Mark Zuckerberg. We can also maybe open stores as a way of attracting customers and telling our story. So what are the channels of distribution that you're using today? Or maybe it's just one.
Yeah, great question. When we started, we were direct consumer only. and online. And over time, as the business has matured, we've truly built an omnichannel brand and business. Our biggest channel is still e-commerce, but that's going to be changing in the very near future. We are selling through our own retail stores. We have 5 retail stores of our own in Colorado, in Washington State, and in Utah, with a new store opening in San Francisco here shortly, and a 7th store another one opening in Colorado. And now we have a plan to open, maybe 40 retail stores over the next few years. And so retail is definitely part of our long-term strategy. But I think maybe potentially even more interesting than that is this idea of building a brand through partnerships with other retailers. And so, REI, for example, and we have about 800 other retailers that sell our product, a lot of really, niche outdoor retailers. And so I think that as we thought about wholesale, we had to be very disciplined. I think of the wholesale channel as a pyramid. And at the very top of the pyramid in the outdoor industry, you might have these specialty outdoor shops. You go to like Vail, Colorado, or Park City, Utah, or your local, outdoor
where all the
shop.
purest enthusiasts are. Yeah,
exactly. And you want your product in there where those people are discovering the product. If you're Vans shoes, it's like it's the Huntington Beach, surf or skate shop, up at that very top. And then for us, as you kind of move down that pyramid, you have REI and these other maybe larger format outdoor retailers. And then in the middle, and that top of the pyramid is these brand accretive retailers. In the middle, you have these brand neutral, retailers. And for us, that might be a retailer that isn't necessarily an outdoor brand, but an outdoor retailer, but it's a place that kind of gives us a lot of exposure.
Yep.
And then at the very bottom might be, frankly, might be a Macy's or a JCPenney that's kind of more mass. It's not necessarily our customer. Those brand dilutive retailers are the ones we avoid at all costs, at least in the first few decades of the business. Vans actually has their product in all those, all the way down to the JCPenney.
Over time,
yeah, over time. But in the very beginning, you have to stay very disciplined. So we said no to a lot of amazing retailers as we tried to stay very focused on that.
It's hard to do that, right? You have to show some serious discipline.
Yes, absolutely. But I think between, these different channels, we've been able to build a better business. And we found, 75% of our e-commerce revenue comes from unpaid channels. We're not just driving, sales by performance marketing. It's people organically or directly going to us because they've heard about us from word of mouth or they discovered us at an REI store.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did a series of studies over a 5-year period called the New Davids, David and Goliath. And it was profiling all the Davids, right? And I think you're on there. In fact, I know you're on there with all of your friends from business school. And then as it progressed, the Goliath wasn't really knocked out. He had one eye open, right? And then he stood up, and then he started learning the tricks of David, and then David started learning the tricks of Goliath, and now they're kind of holding hands and going off into the sunset together because they've learned each other's tricks, right? So it's kind of interesting that the term digital native talks about the provenance maybe, but ultimately everyone's now learning the best of each other's way of doing business, which is kind of a cool thing.
I totally agree. I think, I think of our relationship. I'm mentioning REI because they're one of our biggest partners, but we have such a special relationship with them. And in some ways that they're a competitor, but they're not. I mean, we see them as a partner in like helping us build our brand and grow it. And we want to help them achieve their goal. They have they're very strong and mission driven organization that wants to have, impact in the community and wants to protect the environment. It's like, we can help them do that. And that which helps us accomplish our mission as well. So I think I love this analogy of David and Goliath holding hands, walking off into the sunset together.
Yeah, well, I'll send it to you afterwards. So because it's very rare for me, I shouldn't say it quite like that, because it's a luxury for me to be able to talk to someone who is able to operate and think on sort of this kind of a plane that is, I think, quite ethereal when it comes to consumer products, right? It's trying to see the wide view, including the future of where the consumer is going, and you're feeling that consumer. You're feeling them being pulled by the meaning that is imbued into your products. Can you give us some consumer insights that you may have that kind of were surprising to you that you're comfortable sharing? Because we're very big into insights here, and we do a lot of studies and analytics around where the consumer is today, but also where she and he are thinking about what's coming next. How do you feel? How do you feel the consumer is doing coming off of this pandemic? How do you feel they're doing in general? And where do you feel the consumer is directionally over the next few years?
Yeah, really, really great question. And I'll do my best to answer it. I could probably pull in a person or two on my team that would do a much better job at answering this than I will. But there's a few trends that we've seen over this last 18 months. We've seen average order value decrease pretty significantly. I think this is a trend as people are more careful about where they're spending their money. Some of it is also just due to the mix of our product. Our best-selling product before the pandemic, our hero product, was a travel bag, kind of an expensive, like really amazing bag. But people aren't traveling, and we kind of shifted towards. We started making face masks, and for every mask that we made, we were donating a mask to a community in need somewhere in the developing world, and it's been very rewarding. But like those masks, like average order value is a lot smaller.
Yep.
But customer acquisition cost has also in turn reflected that as well. So our customer acquisition cost has dropped significantly. We've seen definitely in the outdoor industry, we've seen a big shift online of people buying outdoor products on, through our e-commerce site. So that's definitely been a shift. It's been interesting. We've always been skewed female. About 60% of our customers are women, which in the outdoor industry is pretty rare. It's typically maybe 50-50 or maybe skews even male. With ethnically diverse customers as well. It's most outdoor brands tend to skew older, white, and male. And we've seen quite the opposite, with our brand. And that was the intent. We wanted to build a brand that was more inclusive. And we've seen during this last 18 months, we've actually seen that accelerate. And so we've seen this actually continue to skew more female, more diverse. More people are going to the outdoors that maybe before didn't feel part of it. And I think that's been an interesting trend that we've been watching. And frankly, we love it. I mean, This is what we want to see. I want to go into the outdoors and see more people that look different, that represent our communities that we live in.
What's so interesting to me about what you just said is that, fashion didn't ever really, let's say, feature in your industry because, frankly, at that point in time, older white males weren't necessarily into it. And so, but with your distinctive look, and I guess it is a fashion because it's got colors and the colors change and are appealing to those demographics that actually do care more about those things. And it tends to be more diverse and more female populations. I think that's fascinating. And by the way, those customers, frankly, like to spend more on that too. So that's an interesting place to be. And so, look, I could speak to you for hours, so I'm going to try and be sparing with your time. And I got one last question for you. When you look at the pantheon of businesses out there, it could be brands, but it could be frankly anything. What gets you excited and maybe moved about where the world is going through consumerism? You touched on something that I think is really interesting, which we talk about in some of our studies, is this notion that capitalism is becoming more benevolent. And it's a bit like the Gordon Gekko approach, right? So he would say greed is good, but you're saying if it's appealing to someone, if it's good for business, then you should do it. And it turns out that you're proving, and many others are proving, that it's good for business to appeal to the heartstrings and to the benevolent nature of consumers. Then, quite frankly, you're right. The approach to doing business, which was every penny should stay within the company, maybe actually can now be turned on its head. What gets you excited about the next decade, and where are you sort of seeing the embers of excitement beyond obviously your direct company?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think what's really interesting about this movement is that I'm not necessarily inspired by all the businesses that are doing this better than they used to. I'm actually most inspired by young people. Like when I go to a college or when I talk to young entrepreneurs, every one of them is thinking about these issues. This was not the case 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yep.
And so that's what gives me the most hope. It's not necessarily the businesses that exist today. It's the businesses that will exist tomorrow.
Yep.
And I am so optimistic about the future because I see these young people thinking so differently about why they exist, their purpose, what they want to be doing, where they want to work. And I think that's going to drive and change the market in a massive way. We have to change capitalism. We have to do it better. We're destroying our planet. We're leaving people behind, and we can do a better job. And my hope is that these young people will look at Cotopaxi and say, I'm inspired by that, but I can do it better.
Yeah.
I have ideas on how to do it better, and I believe they will.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm privileged to serve on the board of Parsons, the School of Design in New York City, and for 15 years now, every single one of their students in every single discipline across everything from fashion to graphic design to interior design to the architecture areas. Every single course is imbued with sustainability and has been for 15 years. And so you get this factory of 5,500 kids in any 4-year period. So call it 1,200 or 300 kids every year graduating with this mindset of we have to try and design a better future. And I think you're right that those young people are the ones who not only are designing the future, and there are probably many of them in your company, but they're also the consumers, right? So it becomes hopefully a self-fulfilling prophecy that also hopefully doesn't just reside at the premium end of the market, that can also reside further down. I guess on that last point, do you think that this can exist, call it in the mid to mass market as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think we're seeing that some of these companies that are doing things well, like we're looking at, talking again about some of my classmates, but, Allbirds, going public later this year, and Warby Parker. I mean, these are very large companies that are scaling quickly still. And so, I think we're starting to see this trend of really responsible, wonderful companies that are reaching mass scale, and this isn't just like a startup movement. If you look at like the certified B Corps, 99% of them were very small companies in those early days. That's not the case anymore, and I think we're going to see a bigger and bigger shift towards large companies doing this right.
Well, from your lips to God's ears, it's my job now to get you back to get to running your company. So, Davis Smith, founder and CEO of Cotopaxi, thank you so much for joining me on the Safari.
Thanks, Mortimer. Really appreciate it.
If you want to learn a little bit more about Traub, you can go to traub.io, where you'll learn a lot about everything that we do. If you're enjoying the Safari, please do share it with your friends and colleagues within the industry. And please also don't forget to subscribe and like it. Until next time.